You're now all being recorded. Alrighty, so I think Kat is logging on. Here we go. Hello, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
We are recording this just so I can send it out to the girls who didn't get to be here. There's 34 of us in total. We have about half here now. Oh, more than half actually. So welcome everyone. This is Kat and she is going to tell you all about being studious and college admissions. So I'm just going to turn it over to her. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. I have some slides prepared because I'm going to go through a whole bunch of information, and then I know that you probably have some questions about college admissions. So I want to encourage you, if you have some questions, like jot them down because I will literally answer anything. So, anything you're wondering about college admissions, I'm your gal. All right, so here we go. Share a little bit here, and let me go to my presentation. There we go. Everything you wanted to know about college admissions, but maybe a little bit too shy to ask. I know that going into this as a profession, we assume a lot of times that everybody who's applying to college is a college expert, and that's not true. And so I want to encourage you to ask a whole bunch of questions at the end. My name is Kat Clowes. I am the owner of March Consulting, and what I do is I'm an independent educational consultant. So I spend all day, every single day, working on college admissions. I help students get into college, find colleges that fit them really well, and understand how to present themselves in their application. And it's my jam. It's what I do all day, every day. Here's a picture of some of the visits that I've done. I visit about 10 to 15 schools a year. I'm a part of 2 professional organizations of other college counselors, although we don't like to call ourselves counselors because we don't have any psychology degrees or anything like that. I'm a graduate of Santa Clara University with a degree in communications and a double major in classics. So I took ancient Greek for fun because I'm a dork. And when I was applying to college, I kind of did everything wrong. I had no idea what I was doing, which is the whole reason that I started my business, is to help families like mine navigate this complicated process. I also have my MBA from Mount St. Mary's University with an emphasis in entrepreneurship. And I got my certificate in educational consulting from UC Irvine. And actually, in a couple months, I'll be taking my certification test to become a certified educational planner, which requires about 5 years of experience and a whole bunch of college visits. I'm really excited. I'm probably the only person on the planet that's excited to take tests. So I wanted to start with some very common myths about the college admissions process, and you might be surprised about some of the things that you hear. I've heard myths said to me from students that I heard when I was in high school, and I'm like, no, that's not true. That's not true anymore. So let's start with the first one, which is that there is some secret strategy to get you admitted. If you bake the Harvard Admissions Committee cookies, you're automatically in. If your cousin's roommate's best friend's, puppy decided that they were going to do this, and that's what got them in. The truth is there's no secret strategy to getting into college. If there were, I would be a bajillionaire. What's really important is that you are yourself. Be yourself, be your best self. We're very familiar with that here at DYW. You don't want to try to strategize or package yourself in any way to admissions officers in your whole application. What's really important is that you showcase what you're truly passionate about, what you enjoy learning, who you are as a person. And I know that word passion is thrown around a lot. And some of you might be thinking, I'm 16, 17 years old. I don't know what my passion is yet. That's normal at your age. I don't know why we expect you guys to, know your passion in the traditional sense of the word, because that requires a lot of years of experience in the world. When I talk about passion here, I talk about the things that you genuinely enjoy doing. And it could be something really small. It doesn't have to be that you cured cancer. It could be that you have a passion for, going fishing with your dad, or spending time on the dance floor or at the ballet bar. Maybe you're really excited about your music practice or learning new things or going on Wikipedia wormholes, just learning about history. All of those are passions that you can communicate in your application. And so when we say passion, we mean it a little bit different than like, this is the one thing I'm going to do for my entire life, right? The other thing, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, is that letters of recommendation is kind of a missed opportunity usually. Oh, it looks like, I have to.
Yeah,
I'm the
I'm
host, so I have
so
to let all these
sorry.
people in, right?
Yeah, can you let them in? I'm so sorry to
right.
interrupt. It's like a weird, I need to figure out co-hosting. I haven't figured that out yet. Zoom is still slightly. Thank you so much.
It's all right. Here we go. I will continue to do that as we go to if we have more people in the waiting room.
Thank you so much. Really
I kept seeing it and I was like,
thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm going to talk about letters of recommendation in a little bit because I think that's one of the biggest missed opportunities that students have in their applications. Mostly you want to request letters from people who know you really well and can be specific. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Those are just a few tips to making really standout applications. Admissions officers, they want to hear from you, who you are and what you're passionate about. That's it. There's nothing that they want to hear other than that. And I know a lot of students try to give admissions officers what they want to hear, and they can tell, hands down, every single time. All right. The other myth is that you should rely on the best colleges lists to determine whether a college is right for you. There's actually a lot of trouble with these lists. And the most famous one is US News and World Report. And a lot of students will go to the top engineering programs or the top, pre-med programs or the top this or that, the top 50 schools in the nation, the top 10 or 20 schools in the nation. The problem with this is that for US News and World Report, all of that information is based on what the school says about themselves and what other schools say about other schools. The data is not very well collected, and it's not based on the outcomes, meaning the students who are graduating and what they're doing after they go to that college. It's solely based on the admitted freshman class and the opinions that the presidents and the deans have of different programs. So the data is really flawed. If you want to look this up, Malcolm Gladwell in the New York Times or the New Yorker had a really good in-depth look at the data that's used for US News and World Report. The other reason that you don't want to base your college list on rankings is that one size doesn't fit all. A great example of this is that UCLA would have been a really bad school for me. And I know you guys are like, oh, but UCLA is an amazing school. UCLA would have been really bad for me because it would have been overwhelmingly too big. I don't do well in big classes, and my first 2 years would have been, 100, 150, maybe even 200 people plus in a big classroom. I don't advocate for myself very well. I didn't in college at all, actually. And so at UCLA, where you have to be a little bit more assertive to get the things that you need, I wouldn't have done well at all. So things to think about, you don't want to just go off of a list. You want to think of a college that's a good fit for you. Also, magazine rankings, they don't take into account what you might want out of a college and what you want out of your experience. And that's what's most important. To explore colleges, now with the pandemic, you can do a lot of online options. So you can do an online info session. A lot of different departments have their own online info sessions, which is great. I highly recommend that you do that. You can schedule one or you can watch one on YouTube, which is amazing. You can do online visits. You can do research online, not just with the school website, but other people's opinions of the school, what it's really like, pricing, things like that. And talk with your admissions rep. Don't be afraid to contact the admissions office and ask questions because they would love to talk to you. Every admissions officer I've ever met, they are the most overwhelmingly nicest people on the planet, and they want to find reasons to admit you. They are not in the back room throwing darts at your headshot well, you guys know what headshot is, picture of you in the back. Rank your colleges on your own criteria, not on somebody else's criteria. Another myth is that the best time to visit colleges is after you've been admitted. And the truth is the best time to visit colleges is whenever you have the means to do so, the time to do so. You don't have to travel all the way across the country to visit colleges. I would recommend that you find a college nearby to go visit, even if you're not considering that school, because it will tell you a little bit more about what you want out of your college experience. If it's a really big research university, you'll get a taste for what that feels like. What does it feel like on campus? What are their offerings? Things like that. If it is a smaller private school, you'll get a taste of that. And so you don't have to spend a whole bunch of money visiting colleges in order to get an idea of what you want. It can help you to develop your criteria about what you want out of your college and how you're going to rank each school. And it can help you evaluate, all of your needs. You want to apply to colleges you actually have a genuine interest in attending. I don't want you randomly applying to a quote unquote safety school because I guess if I don't get in anywhere, I'll go to this school. There's a lot of amazing schools that would love to have you that accept a wide variety of different students, and they have a high acceptance rate. And so pick your likely schools. I don't like calling them safety schools because it sounds like you're, compromising on something. Pick your likely schools wisely and be excited to participate in those. I'm going to talk about likely schools a little bit later. We talk about a balanced college list and some of the perks you can get from some of your likely schools because you may be in the top 25% of applicants. Remember, you're going to be living in this place for the next 4 years. So evaluate everything on your visit. If you, like my family, don't have a whole bunch of money to go visit colleges and flights and hotels and everything else, we did narrow it down to my top 3. And then from there, we went to go visit after I was admitted. So I did go after I was admitted because we had funding limitations. But we had also visited schools within driving distance before then. So I knew a little bit more about what I wanted, which is great. I apologize if there's hammering in the background. They're redoing our roof and I caught them at a break, I think, and they're on the other side of the house. So I'm not sure if my mic's picking that up. The fourth myth that I have is that if you don't have a perfect GPA, you're never get accepted into a good college. Now, I know all of you have really high GPAs. I know the group that I'm talking to. I want you to take a deep breath with college admissions because we get so anxious because all we hear is about how hard college is to get into. And really the newspapers and online, they're focusing on some of those big top 10 schools that have, a low acceptance rate because they have so many qualified applicants apply for every one seat in their freshman class that they have. But a majority of schools are not like that. There are really well-known colleges, but there are also really prestigious programs with less known universities. If you are a pre-med student, meaning a pre-professional path, you're planning to go to medical school, pre-med actually isn't a major. You can pick any major and be a doctor. So that's something to keep in mind. You just have to put together your prerequisites for med school, which usually encompasses a science minor. I want you to look at a couple colleges that have amazing pre-med placement rates, meaning that their med school acceptance rates are really high, and they work to get you researching and doing your own research before you graduate. And there's a small college in Pennsylvania that I'm pretty sure none of you have heard of, and it's called Ursinus College. Very unique. URSINUS, Ursinus College. They have a really high med school acceptance rate because they focus for their pre-med students on having them do their own research through their 4 years. They have small class sizes in their science classes, so you really get to know your professors, and they score really highly on the MCAT. So don't always think that you have to go to an amazing big research university with a medical school to get into medical school, because for med school, and this is true for law school, this is true for your, if you're thinking about going to graduate school, et cetera, there's a lot of really great programs that are smaller at less famous schools that might serve you a little bit better. Another thing to remind you of is that most colleges admit more than half of their applicants. The average acceptance rates for the US is about 66% for colleges. It's stayed pretty consistent there, even with the pandemic. So don't worry. We just want to make sure that you have a balanced college list. And there's colleges out there for everybody. So don't worry. I know one of the biggest worries of any student, and I had this worry too, is that you're going to do all this work and you're not going to get in anywhere or in anywhere that you like. And I promise you, you will have more acceptances that you know what to do with. So that's a worry for anyone, despite your GPA, test scores, anything like that. The last myth that I want to cover is that colleges are looking for a well-rounded student. This was true when I was applying for colleges 20 years ago, in 2001, before you guys were all born. They're actually looking for a well-rounded student body now. So this is a myth that's been going on for a long time. They want students who show a commitment to things that they're genuinely interested in. And so it's not as important that you have 17.25 activities like you needed to when I was applying to college. They want to see you have, a handful of really deeply involved activities, and to express your interest in those. Instead of spending 1 hour a month in French club, they would rather see you spending 20 hours a month in French club, maybe with a leadership position, sharing French with others, doing French tutoring, maybe, things like that. You want to connect with admissions officers. I told you it was really important for you to contact the admissions office. The reason is that schools are starting to factor in something called demonstrated interest. And demonstrated interest is the likelihood of you attending their school if they gave you an acceptance. And they're tracking that. They're putting this into perspective through software. So some colleges are tracking demonstrated interest by looking at, are you opening their emails? Have you talked to their admissions office? Have you gone on a virtual tour? Maybe you've contacted admissions to talk to someone in the department for the major you're thinking about. So if you are a communications major, have you reached out and maybe talked to someone in the communications department, or asked to talk to a current communications student to get to know a little bit more information about the program or whether or not it's a good fit for you? And so they're using software to track those interactions to make sure that they aren't your, fifth choice school. Tulane is a really famous school that does this. They are tracking and considering demonstrated interest in their admissions decision. It's not overwhelming, but they are looking at it. And so you want to start doing that now, especially for your top 3 schools. I can tell you that the Ivy Leagues and the UCs do not track demonstrated interest. You don't have to worry about that. But if you weave this into your research process, it will give you a lot more information about why this school is a good fit for you. And that makes your application just naturally better, especially if they ask you, why do you want to go to this school? You have a lot more detailed information other than, oh, you have a good program and a nice campus and I really enjoy your sports, right? And then they're also looking for you to demonstrate intellectual curiosity. Have you spent time learning things kind of on your own? Or have you, been exposed to a new subject in school that you were really excited about? So demonstrating that you are naturally intellectually curious because you are applying to college, right, would be a good idea to show on your application. And that's really what they're kind of, looking for as they're, going over all the components of your application. What are you most interested in? Who are you? How are you going to contribute to our student body? And what are you curious about? So I know that I said, don't write to what they're looking for, but these are things that you might want to make stand out a little bit as you're doing your essays and your activities list and things like that. Develop your emerging interests into passions as you grow into adult. We want to look past college admissions into your future careers and what you're genuinely interested in. And so explore a little bit. Don't feel like you have to be locked into one thing. As an example, I used to be a costume designer. I turned that into a career. So it went from an interest, a passing interest, to something I really enjoyed. And then I turned that into a full-time career. I got paid to do that. So that was really neat. That was in a past life though. I want to talk about college admissions a little bit and remind you that it's not about where you go, it's what you do when you get there. The name alone is not going to make you successful. It's all about what you're going to take advantage of while you're there. Again, colleges accept nearly 2/3 of first-time freshman applicants, and only a small percentage of the colleges in the US are considered highly selective, accepting under 25% of their applicants. Now, I know that you probably have a lot of questions because I know you guys have some of these highly selective colleges on your list. And I can say that there's no guarantee for any of those schools. You can have a perfect test score, you can be valedictorian, you can have great activities, amazing things that you're doing, awards and everything else. And there is still a chance that you will not be accepted. So is that personal to you? No, not at all. The dean of Stanford admissions, I just did a session with him last week. We were talking about how students take this personally, and it's merely because they're putting together one freshman class for that year, and they have more qualified applicants than they have space for. And so, it's nothing personal to you if you don't get admitted or if you get waitlisted. It's merely that as they were putting the class together that year, they put together the best class that they could. A great example of this is that they had, last year, they had both of their oboists graduating from college, and they needed 2 oboists. If you're a trumpet player, unless you go back to 5th grade and change your instrument, there's not a lot you can do about that, right? So there's a lot of things that are outside of your control, especially with the highly selective colleges that you might want to take into consideration as you're applying. We call them wildcard schools, meaning that we don't know what's going to happen. So we want to make sure that we have schools that you fit the profile for, that are more target schools, and then 1 or 2 likely schools. You want to create a diverse list with various degrees of selectivity. I mentioned I was going to talk about your likely schools. The great thing about likely schools is for a lot of those, my definition of likely schools is they have over 70% acceptance rate. As you look at their stats, like their GPA and test scores, you're in the top, 20%, 25% of applicants. What's great about those is that a lot of those types of universities and colleges have specialty programs for their top applicants. The University of Arizona, for example, has an amazing honors program that you can be a part of. And honors in college is this special group of the top students. You get priority registration, meaning you get to choose your classes first. You oftentimes live in the honors dorms, meaning that you have your own residence hall just for honors students. Oftentimes you'll have access to advanced tutoring. Your class sizes are usually infinitely smaller, 20. They're usually more discussion based, and you'll be amongst students who come to class prepared and you guys talk about the material. You get a chance to really get to know your professors. So if you're thinking about graduate school, that will help you infinitely in the graduate application process because you'll have really strong letters of recommendation from your professors. There's a lot of times first choice at research, at internships, specialty programs that they have there at the school that you get. And you're oftentimes considered a school ambassador. So anytime there's a guest lecturer, if there's a Nobel, prize winner, if there's, a Pulitzer Prize winner, any of these important dignitaries come to the school, you'll be invited to those events, dinners, and things like that. So it's great networking too. So I highly encourage that you look at honors college programs at your likely schools because that can make it like an Ivy League experience. And a lot of times there's extra scholarships attached to that. So you could probably get, a half tuition, full tuition, or full ride scholarship through a lot of those programs. So don't skimp on your likely schools. Some deadlines to pay attention to. You'll be applying the fall of your senior year. And so on August 1st, I forgot to change my slide. Sorry, from 2020 to 2021. This Sunday, the UC application will open, as will the common application. It'll be refreshed for your year. For financial aid, the FAFSA and CSS profile and Cal Grant verification forms open on October 1st. So you want to get those done with your parents ASAP on October. And then November 1st through 30 is when you would submit your UC application, your CSU application, and then oftentimes early decision, early action starts on November 1st. I'm going to cover that in a second. Just some basics, because there's a lot of confusion oftentimes with college versus university. The term college only refers to an institution that offers a 2 or 4 year degree, vocational or technical schooling. A university offers graduate and professional programs. Really, the only difference here with the colleges that you're going to be applying to is a college doesn't have overwhelming amount of graduate degrees, which is after your first 4 years of college, and a university does. That's really the only difference. Aspen, you raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, can you just go back to the last slide really fast?
Sure. Oops. Here we go.
Thank you.
So August 1st, applications open for the coalition, the UC application, the Common App, the CSU application. So if you're looking at San Diego State, Cal Poly, that actually doesn't open till October 1st. That's the only one that's super late. Financial aid opens on October 1st. And then November 1st through 30th is when you can start submitting your UC application. And it's when some of the deadlines start rolling. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Perfect. Okay. A research university, what that means is they have professors on staff that are solely there to do research. They're not teaching. It does not necessarily mean that there's an overwhelming amount of research opportunities for undergraduate students, which is your first 4 years of college. And that's a big myth, is that even, I'm going to go to this big research university and I'm going to be able to do all the research that I want. A lot of times that research will be reserved for graduate level students. So something to keep in mind. A liberal arts college can have research. A lot of the smaller colleges design research for their undergraduates. So you're actually more likely to get research experience at a smaller school than you may a research university. A liberal arts college, what that is it's a belief that the more exposure you have to different subjects, the better you will be overall as a person. The better you will be in solving big problems. They're famous for teaching you how to think through big problems, not teaching you what to think, but how to think through big problems. And so they will usually have in their general ed requirements a wide variety of classes that you can take. I took a history of science class for one of my science requirements, which was really cool. And they focus solely usually on the first 4 years of college, so undergraduates, and all their funding goes to giving you guys opportunities. So don't count out liberal arts colleges, especially if you're a STEM major, which is science, technology, engineering, or math. Of course, community college, that's your first 2 years, and then you can transfer to a 4 year. Ivy League, Stanford is actually not an Ivy League school. And the only reason is that it was a group of 8 original schools in an athletic conference. So, Harvard, Columbia, et cetera, they are all in the same athletic conference. That's all that means. Private school, sponsored by and run by private benefactors or nonprofit. They're generally a little bit more older than state schools. A specialty school may be a STEM only school, like Colorado School of Mines, might be like Caltech, MIT, might be like Cal Arts, Juilliard. They focus on certain areas or certain majors. A state school, of course, they get all their funding from the state. So UCLA is a state school, Berkeley is a state school. A technical school is usually for job training, so vocational school where you can get certifications and things like that. For culinary, mechanical work, and then vocational, similar, provides different training for nursing or medical, etc. Different types of applications. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. So some schools have their own applications. Those are called proprietary applications. You don't need to really know that, other than that the UC system has one application for all the UC schools. The CSU system has one application for all of their schools. The Texas system has one application. It's Apply Texas for all the Texas schools. So some schools have their own applications. Most schools accept something called the Common Application. You can find this on commonapp.org. And over 900 schools use this, including Stanford, including Caltech, MIT, the big names that we've heard of. The coalition application, there's only one school in the nation that only takes the coalition application. So if you're looking at University of Washington, Seattle, you will have to do the coalition application. They also are accepted at other schools, but the Common App is the most common. The most common. So I would recommend looking at the Common App first. The universal application is only about 70 schools, and that one's kind of going away. You will probably not need to do that one. And then, like I said, state consortiums like the UC and the CSU system have their own. Oh yes, MIT has their own application. You are correct. Georgetown also has its own application. You are correct. Let's talk about deadlines. So I said that from November 1st through 30th, you can start submitting your UC application, and that's usually when deadlines start. There are a couple of different types of deadlines. You may see with some schools that they offer something called early decision. Early decision means that you submit your application earlier than their usual deadline. And that usually starts November 1st. Sometimes it's November 15th. Sometimes it's December 1st. Early decision means that you are telling the school that this is your top choice school. And if they say yes, you're going there. It's a binding decision. Now, you might be wondering, why would I do that? Why would I, apply to this one school? And if they say yes, I'm going, and I'm withdrawing the rest of my applications. For a lot of schools, there's a higher acceptance rate for early decision applicants. And so Duke, for example, if you're looking at Duke regular decision, which is their deadline, if you don't apply by regular decision, they're not considering you for that year's class. Duke's regular decision acceptance rate is about 7%. Their early decision acceptance rate is about 20%. And so by applying early decision to Duke, there is a higher likelihood of you getting in, perhaps. They also fulfill 50% of their spots to early decision. And so if Duke is your number one and you've looked financially and made sure that that makes sense, and you are 100% that if like Duke is the one for you, you might want to consider applying early decision. Now, the disadvantages of this is that sometimes legacy students and athletes also apply early decision. And sometimes they have, a competitive profile as well. And so sometimes the early decision pool can be a little bit more competitive. But if you are looking at some of those really highly selective schools and they offer early decision, and I know you all have amazing profiles and financially it makes sense, what they're going to offer you makes the most sense. Early decision might be a consideration. Early action is all of the benefits of early decision, but it's not binding. So you have until April or May to make your decision on whether or not you want to go there. The exception is something called restricted early action. Harvard and Stanford have restricted early action. And what this means is you can only apply to that school early action. And they have different rules on that. So, and no school's early decision. So you want to make sure Stanford on their website has the restrictions with restricted early action. So you can look at that. Harvard does as well. And again, that puts you in a different applicant pool. So it might be to your advantage. I would advise a little bit of secret sauce here, unless you have legacy at Stanford or you're an athlete being recruited, I would not recommend that you apply restricted early action to Stanford. They make the cut right there. So a lot of schools with early decision, early action, they'll do what's called deferring you to regular decision, meaning that they're saying maybe, and then they'll put you in the regular decision pool and evaluate your application. So unless you're legacy at Stanford or you're a recruited athlete, I do recommend that you apply a regular decision and not restricted early action. For regular admission, this is regular decision. If you don't get your application in by this deadline, they're not accepting it. These are usually, December, January, February deadlines. I recommend that you do not wait till New Year's Eve to start your application for a January 1st deadline. And then some schools have what's called rolling admissions, meaning that they accept applications at any time. They'll evaluate them as they come in. And then usually they have a priority deadline for scholarships in February or in January. And you can apply anywhere from September to right before school starts. Examples of rolling admissions are at like Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, University of Alabama, Boise State, University of Arizona would be rolling admissions examples. What makes up your application? It's slightly different at different schools, but most commonly, especially for those highly competitive schools, you're going to want, your student identification, your social security number, contact information, your high school transcript, senior year classes. Now, we have a lot of test optional schools this year. The UCs are not using testing at all. The CSUs are not using testing at all. Other schools are test optional. If you have more questions about test optional, you can ask me at the end. A lot of times schools will give you the option to submit your SAT or ACT scores. For AP scores, you have the opportunity to submit your AP scores on your application. You do not have to submit your AP scores on your application. So if you did really well in your math and science APs, you might want to report those. If you had a really bad day on your English and history AP tests, you don't have to report them at all. You can pretend that they never happened. It's okay. You will be expected to report a little bit about your activities, honors. Sometimes they'll allow you to attach an expanded resume or brag sheet. A lot of other people call it a brag sheet. High schools call it a brag sheet. I call it a resume because brag sheet just sounds, I don't like that term. They will also ask usually for 2 teacher recommendations and a counselor recommendation and or an outside recommendation. So a coach, an advisor, someone that has known you outside of school. And then they'll have a main personal statement that you will fill out and or supplemental essays that, your main personal statement will be about 1-page single spaced, about 650 words. And your supplemental essays can range anywhere from 50 words to 650 words. It just depends on the school. The UCs will not have you do a main personal statement. They're going to have you select 4 questions out of 8 and give them responses that are 350 words long. So slightly different for the UCs. Do not wait until Thanksgiving week to start on your applications. It's a really, really bad idea. You should be starting on those now, especially the essays. Even if it's like the worst draft in the world, you have words on paper. So I highly recommend that you start getting organized now going into senior year, because senior year is really busy and hectic, and you want to give yourself time to draft these things, collect these things, etc. I promise you I talk about letters of recommendation because I think this is one of the biggest missed opportunities in students' applications. Next to how hard are your classes, your GPA, and possibly test scores, admissions officers lean towards letters of recommendation because these are from people who see you on a daily basis, usually your teachers, who see you in the classroom, from your counselor who may or may not know you, but can give context as to how you compare with students at your school, and someone who's seen you maybe in one of your activities. For your recommendation letters, you want to give this person time. You want to choose your people wisely. You want to make sure that you are choosing someone who can give specifics about you. And what I mean by that is you don't want someone to just say, Kat is a great student. She works really hard in my AP class. She gets all her assignments in on time. I highly recommend her for your university. That doesn't really tell me anything about you because I have your transcript. I know that you're an AP student, right? Instead, a really strong recommendation may be, Kat really struggled with inequalities in my class. And she came in before school and after school. She asked a lot of questions. She always came in with videos from Khan Academy that helped explain the concept. She asked me, 50 times for extra practice program problems, not because she was concerned about getting an A in my class, but she was really concerned that she could not get this concept, down. And it was like that for most of my math class. Is she was really interested in making sure that she understood the subject, and she went above and beyond in that. And because of that, I invited her to the math team or whatever. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you did this test at the end and all of your hard work paid off, right? So specifics about maybe assignments, projects, ways that you speak up in class, support your classmates, etc. Specific things. And the way that you can get people to write about specific things is to give them a cover letter that maybe mentions a few specific ways that they know you and things that they might want to write about. This seems very awkward, but in academia, it's actually really common, is for you to be able to ask someone to write something about you. So it seems awkward, but in academics, it's not very awkward at all. So if you can give them a cover letter that gives them examples of things that they might be able to write, that would make sure that you get a really strong, very specific letter of recommendation. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that each person is focusing on different aspects of you. You don't everybody to say, oh, this, you're great. You want to make sure that they are focusing on maybe your athletic side, and then maybe your teamwork side, and then maybe your intellectual curiosity side. And then finally, remember, it's not about the fame of the name. If your local congressman can write you a letter of recommendation, I mean, that's great, but can they be really specific, or is it just a name? What would be better is if your club advisor wrote you a really specific, amazing letter of recommendation, because they know you much better than getting the mayor or a congressperson to write you a letter of recommendation. And then finally, what happens? There's an acceptance. Yay, awesome. You want to look over your financial aid offers and everything else. If you get waitlisted to one of your top 3 schools, you can write what's considered a letter of continued interest, telling them that they are still one of your top schools. This is why you're a good match for that school. This is what you're looking forward to participating in at that school. Get that in ASAP. It may tilt the scales in your favor for an acceptance once you're waitlisted. If you're denied, that's okay. Move on to your other options. It's nothing personal. As someone who was denied from her first choice school and I cried, I know now that I ended up at the school I was supposed to go to, and it's more about what you're going to do there than the name. Okay. You will find out from colleges usually in March whether or not you got in. And by April 1st, usually they'll let you know if you got in or not. Most colleges will have you decide by May 1st whether or not you're going to enroll there. Finally, make sure that you are accurate on all your applications. We want to make sure that you're, nothing is if they, call a club and you're not in that club, it's bad news. Beware of senioritis. You want to keep your grades at the same level to which you applied. Make sure you print out your application confirmations and pay close attention to your email. All right, so now I'm going to open it up for questions. We got about 15 minutes-ish for any and all questions you might have for me, including, I know it's been a crazy year. Admissions has changed a lot because of the pandemic. So go ahead and you can put it in the chat, or you can just unmute your mic.
I had a question about the cover letter that you send to potential recommenders. Would that just be like examples of what I did in the class that the teacher could write about? Or can you give more of an explanation of what I could put on there?
Sure. So the way that I have my students do it is the first paragraph is kind of like a thank you so much for agreeing to write me a letter of recommendation, because you're going to assume that when you ask this person, they say yes, and then you will hand them this letter, right? So the first paragraph is, a little flattery, never hurts. Thank you so much. I learned so much in your class. Remember, you're writing specifically to this person. So if you want to add in, a class inside joke or something like, I'll never forget the catch-up incident of 2021, right? You can put that in that first paragraph. In the second paragraph, I would put, any deadlines. So, I'm really hoping to submit my applications by September 30th. So if you could have that in before then, or if you have any questions, please let me know. And then what I do is I have students identify what are their standout qualities. And what I mean by that is if I only had letters of recommendation to get to know you as a student, what makes you you? What would you want me as an admissions officer to know? And I want you to think beyond hardworking, sorry about the knocking in the background, hardworking, dedicated, because I know that already from your transcripts, the classes that you're taking, your GPA, right? I know you're hardworking and determined. I know that, you do all the things that you're supposed to do, right? It may be that one of your standout qualities is your curiosity. And so for there, you might be able to demonstrate or write in a paragraph how you've demonstrated curiosity in that class. Maybe you guys nerd out in discussions about, maybe you're reading extra books in that subject, or maybe, you joined the PLTW club, at your teacher's suggestion, little ways that you're curious that person then can weave into their letter. Maybe you had a project that teacher always mentions as an example. You might want to mention that in there, right? And so in the middle of your letter, identify what some of your standout qualities are and how you've demonstrated those to that person with specific examples. And you can do it just like, seriously, just like paragraph, curiosity, colon. As you know, in this class, I'm always the one that's like, actually in Williamsburg, right? Like, so it doesn't have to be woven into a specific paragraph. You can just put the quality itself and then, ways that you've demonstrated that quality. And I would maybe outline 2 qualities or 3 qualities about yourself, at least one. And then in the closing paragraph, give them your instructions. I'll be inviting you through the Common App to submit your letter. And then don't forget to tell them that you're probably going to need a copy for scholarships later, because a lot of scholarship applications require a hard copy of that letter. And you can write in there, I don't want to bother you 18 million times over the spring for extra letters. Does that help?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Perfect. A question about music portfolios and how that process differs from dual music degree programs. So for music portfolios, music is a very specific application process. My best advice is for you to contact the music department at each school that you're going to be applying to and talk to their admissions officer. They will tell you everything. You can ask them, what do you look for in an audition tape? You can ask them, I play piano and violin. I'm stronger on piano, but I really want to play violin. Is there a way that I can showcase both? Do you have a music theory placement test? Things like that. Highly recommend for each school, because it's very specific, to contact each school's admissions department in the music department. And then For dual music degree programs, that's all dependent on the school itself. And so music isn't my specialty. I have had a composition major. Right now I have 2 singing majors and a musical theater major, and it is very specific school to school. So that's my best advice. Contact the school. They will love to give you advice. They are very friendly. You can ask them anything, so don't be shy. Okay. I don't know who was first, maybe Emily? See your hand.
Yeah, so I had a quick question in regards to what you said about like a copy of a letter of recommendation just for like scholarships and stuff. So I know like usually or typically like you waive your rights to the recommendation letter. So I was wondering what you mean by like for us to obtain a copy of it, if it's like, yeah, if you can clarify that.
Yes. So in the application itself, a lot of times it'll have you waive your right to see it. And the reason is that you are guaranteeing in admissions that you have not tampered with your letter of recommendation, that the person is free to really write whatever they want. I found that teachers, for the most part, aren't very picky about that. And some of them will literally just hand you a copy of it, like not in a sealed envelope or anything. So you can always talk to that person in person and say, I will need a copy for scholarships. If they just hand you a paper copy and it's not in a sealed envelope, you're allowed to read it. You're not going to get in trouble for reading it. A lot of our local teachers just do that. If they put it in a sealed envelope, I don't recommend that you open it, just ethically, hand it over the scholarship committee, et cetera. Most schools do not, or most teachers and recommenders don't have any problem showing you that letter of recommendation. It's for it's for the college knowing that you haven't tampered with your letter of recommendation, that you waive your right, and that the person is free to write whatever they want. But usually if you're asking the right person, they're going to give you a great letter of recommendation. So you don't have to worry about them being like, well, I mean, Kat's a little, right? So that's another reason that you want to choose the right people. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Sophia, I believe you were next.
Do you think, I know like SATs and ACTs and all that isn't really necessary for a lot of schools now, but do you think it's like it would help to use an SAT or whatever test you have for a technical school, like a nursing school?
So this is a big question that everybody's been asking every admissions officer over the sun, and they're always like, it depends, which drives us crazy, but that's the name of admissions. I would say for a school that is highly selective, if you have a really strong test score, submit it, especially if it's a really competitive program like computer science, nursing, etc. Okay. If your test score is a little, just not submit it unless the school is requiring you to submit it. And I believe off the top of my head, Georgetown is the only one. Georgetown and West Point, the only 2 schools that are requiring you to submit any test scores that you've taken. The way you can find out if you have a good score for the school that you're applying to is to Google the name of the school and the words common data set. This is directly reported by admissions. It's where the College Board gets all of their information. It's where the Princeton Review and all the college search websites get their information. You're going to look at the most recent common data set, mostly 2020, 2021's out. When you click on it, it's going to come up with a very boring PDF. You're going to scroll down to section C as in cat, and it'll say first time freshman admissions. And in those 4 pages, not only will you see the top 25% of test scores from admitted students, so you get to see like where those test scores are. Is it a 1380? Is it a 1510? They'll break it down, but they will also tell you if they take students off the wait list. There's also a basis for selection chart that tells you how that school weighs different parts of your application in their admissions decisions. So it's all secret sauce. So you definitely want to look up the common data set for each of your schools. We have, I usually don't mention our website or anything else like that, but on our website, we have a full guide to what's called demonstrated interest. And in there, I show you how to reference the common data set. I have a video and like a screenshot for it. So you can get that on our website. It's mymarchconsulting.com, and you can just download it. And that shows you that will tell you, do you have a test score in the range of accepted students for each of those schools? Also, don't be afraid to reach out to the admissions office and ask them that question. Would it be better for me to submit a test score for the nursing program? And they will let you know, especially for those highly competitive programs. But I would say yes, if you have a good score, turn it in. If it's a little, you want to pretend it didn't happen, then you can pretend it didn't happen. Madeline, I believe you're next.
Hi, what's up?
Hi.
So my question was that like I've written a few essays, and like college essays kind of freak me out a little bit. How do I like start an essay and make it intriguing and not make the person reading it kind of forget, because they read millions of essays every day?
So let me help you take the anxiety down a little bit. Essays are amazing, but they're such a small percentage of overall what makes the decision in your application. So first and foremost, don't give yourself an ulcer over your essays, because they're not like the all-encompassing part of your application. What's very different is this is not an English class essay, it's creative writing. And oftentimes, I suggest students look at a moment or a string of moments that represent pieces of them to put that together. Start with just what I call word vomit, which is your first draft, and then go from there in trying to really look at what makes your essay unique. Does it showcase your values and what you stand for? Don't worry so much about creating the most amazing hook ever. And that hook is that first couple sentences. Mostly focus on communicating who you are as a person. It should be in your voice. It should sound like you're 17, not that you swallowed a thesaurus. Okay. You can use I, me, contractions, everything else. But that's really my best advice for you. I have a resource for you. A friend of mine, his name's Ethan Sawyer. He's the college essay guy. He has a variety of free resources that you can download to help you brainstorm the structure of your essay and ways to make it really strong. And those are all free. He's amazing. We use his stuff in my practice. I would recommend that you look at the values exercise that he has and the essential objects exercise that he has. And remember, it's creative writing. You can write whatever you want. It's not a formal essay, and you're just communicating how you view the world and what's important to you. That's it. Okay. I hope that helps. Okay. In the chat, let's see. Oh, hi, Vivian. Awesome. Yay. Okay, perfect. Next question, a couple more questions. I don't want to take you guys over.
We do have time if you have time.
Okay.
I built it into the schedule. So I don't know if you have time or not, but we have time if you.
I do. Let me just let my staff know. I'll be slightly late to our staff meeting.
We appreciate that.
I'll be a few minutes late for our staff meeting in a presentation. All right, that's done. Okay, perfect. So let's see. Joy, I believe you're next.
Yeah, I have a question about scholarships, because I know schools give out scholarships when you get admitted. So when they send out you've been accepted, do you see the amount that they're giving you?
Yes. So there's two different ways that you're going to see scholarships and grants, which are all free money. So there are kind of two types of funding for colleges. There's merit scholarships, and that's based on your grades. Used to be based on your test scores, maybe not so much anymore, your accomplishments, etc. And you will find out about merit scholarships when you get your acceptance. So for example, University of Denver, when you get your acceptance letter, they will say we're also awarding you our Dean's Scholarship of $20,000 a year. Yes, awesome. And it'll say, and that's for a total of 4 years, guaranteed all 4 years for a total of, $80,000. So that's one way. The other way, and the other source of funding is called need-based aid. And that is your financial aid award offer, which you usually get 3 to 4 weeks after your acceptance, mostly. You would have to have completed your FAFSA, which is the free application for federal financial aid. And some schools will require the CSS profile, which is an additional financial aid application. You can find out on the financial aid website of each school what forms they, if they require the FAFSA and the CSS or just the FAFSA, what those deadlines are. As long as you get them by the deadlines, you will have your award offer and possibly the cost of the school and anything else that they're offering you, including loans, et cetera, before you have to make your decision. The exception to this is for early decision. What they'll do is your financial aid forms are due at the same time. Sorry about the hammering up above me. At the same time as when your application is due, so that they can give you your award offers at the same time they give you your acceptance, because you have to tell them, you have to accept your acceptance by mid-January usually. So you will know how much you've been offered in scholarships from the school, and you'll know how much it's going to cost you to go there before you have to decide where you're going. Sometimes it's on the website. So if you don't get a letter for it, they'll give you it through your portal and you can look through the financial aid piece. I highly recommend that you go for school-based scholarships first, because schools give the most amount of money to you first and foremost. And then of course we have DYW scholarships. Awesome. And then, we have private scholarships as well. So especially schools, you want to search scholarships in the search bar of each school that you're applying to and see if there's any scholarships that require an additional application. Baylor University, for example, has a full ride scholarship that you can apply for that they award to a certain amount of students every year, but it's a separate application and it's usually due early, like November 1st. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Skylar, I believe you're next.
So there's like a lot of things that need to be done for admissions, and I was just wondering what should be like the first thing to do right now as like priority. I know you said that we should be starting on our college essays, but is there anything else that we should start doing before the school year starts?
I would get your activities list started, even if it's just like one piece of paper where you wrote down all the things that you've done. Your activities should go from freshman year forward, unless you have, you've been in ballet since you were 3. So you can add that you've been in ballet since you're 3, right? As long as you're continuing it. Start drafts of essays and start getting your college list kind of hammered out, because it's hard to know what essays you're going to have to write if you don't know where you're applying, right? If you know hands down you're applying to the UCs, maybe you don't know specifically which UCs yet, but you know the UCs, go ahead and start on the UC. They're called personal insight questions. They hate it when we call them essays. So you can start on those. And then, if you know that you're going to be applying to a school that's going to use the Common App, you can start on that big personal statement. So I would say those are the big 3. If you're planning and you can safely take a test, also SAT or ACT study. Okay. And then I would say September is when you should do letter of rec, start, putting your application together, filling out your name, your address and things like that. And then getting your transcripts and possible test scores sent out. And then October should be dedicated to financial aid and scholarships. Some of the big scholarships, like the Coca-Cola scholarship and things like those start becoming due in October. So you want to start also kind of looking at those a little bit, like about here in your brain, right? Because the smaller local scholarships are sorry, I don't know what that was. The smaller local scholarships are usually in the spring, the big private scholarships are in the fall. So like I said, it doesn't have to be final drafts of essays, just some drafts. So at least you know you've started, you have words on paper, right? And then you won't be looking at this on Thanksgiving week and like, oh my goodness, I gotta get this on, I don't know, right? If you guys can do me a favor, if you've raised your hand, I've answered your question. If you can put your hand down, I believe it's either in reactions or it's under the chat that you can do that. I want to make sure that I get to everyone. Angela, I believe you're next.
I remember that you mentioned like a small college in Pennsylvania with a really good pre-med program. So my question is like, for example, if I were to go to apply to the pre-med program for that small school, but then I realized that later on, I don't really want to do pre-med and I want to like go into another program, another major, would I still have like great opportunities for other majors in a small school compared to if I go to like a larger research university?
Usually, yes. So especially if it's a liberal arts school, and that might be something to look at is how many other programs they have. They will also have really strong opportunities for different majors. So great example, former student of mine, she was a chemistry major. She was pre-med. She went to St. Lawrence University in New York, upstate New York, liberal arts school, amazing, small, great chemistry program. She, 2 years in, decided to be an anthropology major. So she switched over and she had equal, if not even more specific benefits to that program. She got to do an archaeological dig in Prague, which is amazing for a Kern County student. I went to a smaller liberal arts school at Santa Clara, and I transferred as a biology major as a pre-vet tracked student. And during the summer, right before I transferred, I interned with 2 veterinarians and realized I did not want to be a veterinarian. And so I panicked and like picked a major, and I had an amazing communications program that had like a television studio and all this other stuff and an incredible classics program. So if you are worried about that, if you're looking at your sinus, Franklin and Marshall is also famous for their med school placement rates. Look at some of the other programs. A lot of times they'll have amazing business programs, psychology. They're really good in the humanities with like sociology, psychology, history, English, etc. Liberal arts colleges also have, like I said, really strong sciences. You might be able to move around, maybe not toward the med school track, but maybe towards, more research track or, teaching or, innovation. Liberal arts schools also have really great engineering programs where you might be able to get a little bit more opportunities and things like that. So definitely look at the majors they have in their programs. Look at the write-ups about the school, and then don't be afraid to contact admissions and say, if I do change my mind, what are your other standout programs here? And they'll go off. They'll be like, oh, we got an amazing business program. We got this, we got this, we got this, right? So you can look at that as well. Because also, even if you do decide to continue pre-med wise, right, you might want to double major. You might want to minor in something. I always recommend, no matter what major you are, you might want to consider a minor in business because you're going to be in business no matter what you do. Medically, you might have your own practice. You might need to know the like bureaucratic side of the hospital, right? And that's all business. So that might be something to look into too. All right. I want to make sure that I have everybody. It's really important that I get names right. So I believe Mahana? I believe you're next.
Yeah. Minya.
Minya, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned that doing the early decision to Stanford wasn't really worth it. So is it kind of the similar thing for other really selective schools, and kind of like, how can you tell like whether you should do early or not early decision, early action, like versus just waiting for regular?
So Stanford is the only one that I'm a little on from what I've experienced with Stanford and what I've heard from admissions. For most other schools, there is an advantage. I'm going to give you guys another resource. There's a colleague of mine, and he's based in LA. His name is Jeff Levy, Levy. And if you Google him and you go to his website, he actually has a big spreadsheet of early decision, early action rates versus regular decision rates. And so you can look at the data there and see if it's worth applying early action, early decision. For early action, with the exception of restricted early action, like hands down would encourage you to apply early action. And the reason is that for most schools, it's just an added benefit. You get your answers earlier, you get first choices for scholarships and things like that. So, for Stanford, it's slightly different. For all other schools, I would recommend early action, restricted early action, and then talk to your parents and your counselor about early decision at that school. But look at Jeff Levy's early decision acceptance rate spreadsheet. He does it for about 300 to 400 colleges. Amazing resource, and it's free. You just download it off of his website, and he created it so that you guys can kind of have insight into that as well. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Mason?
Oh, it's pronounced Mason.
Mason, so sorry. I told you I'm so sorry. It's important for me to get names right.
It's okay. So my question was, towards the beginning, you mentioned try not to look at US News ranking or these lists for schools, and actually do research and find a college that's a good match for you. When I look at the descriptions of schools and their programs, a lot of times I feel like, to me, a lot of schools feel similar. They'll all say, oh, we have great research opportunities for undergraduates, or oh, we have a lot of on-campus student activities and clubs. So I guess my question is, how can I better differentiate between these schools?
Can you give me an example of 2 schools that you're looking at right now?
I think, for example, I just had a brochure from Washington University in St. Louis, and then maybe I'll just name some random Cornell, or some.
It's funny because I was gonna be like Cornell. All right, so this is where you're gonna take your research a step deeper, and you're like, what else can I do? Okay, so first and foremost, for each school, I would have you do their online info session. They're going to talk about their admissions process, standout programs, and things like that. From there, oftentimes if it's live, they're going to open it up for questions. You may want to ask during that info session or email an admissions counselor. I'm excited about your school. I'm looking at this particular program. What really stands out? What does a typical day look like? When they mention those research programs, ask them for examples, ask them for specifics. Washington University, St. Louis, their science programs, their research directly correlates with their medical program, the Washington, their medical school there. And so you may, when they oh yeah, we have great research opportunities, say, can you give me some examples of research that students have done in the past? And they'll get really specific. And they'll say, oh yeah, and then we have this special program where if you're, the top 10 students in this program, we'll actually pair you up with a PhD student over here to do original research, right? So that's one way that you can get a little bit deeper, is ask those questions for specifics. Internships, what companies do they do a lot of interns go to, right? Cornell's going to have a lot of consulting companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, McKinsey and Company that gobble up a lot of students for internships and jobs after graduation. From there, especially department specific, don't be afraid. Cornell, for example, has tours and info sessions for specific departments and programs. So their engineering department has its own info session online and their own, they have like a faculty panel. Some schools will have a faculty panel and a student panel that they do online. And during those sessions, you can ask, what makes your computer science program different than MIT's computer science program? You can ask that too by email. So you can ask the admissions office if you can speak to someone in the computer science department, and you can ask those questions and they won't be offended. They will be like, oh, why are you asking me that? Like, just go to MIT then. No, because remember in academics, all these people have worked together, right? They all went to school together, right? It's kind of like a team. So just because, Cindy's over there at MIT doesn't mean that I don't know Cindy, right? I'd be like, oh, for that, you need to go to Cindy because that's like her jam. That's her specific area, right? You may also want to look at the faculty members and where did they go to school? What are their research projects? What are their specifics? For activities, ask current students, what do you guys do on the weekends? What does a typical day look like? What are some secret things about this school that I should know, right? You can go on the student activities website and you can look at all the different clubs. A lot of times you might want to click around and see if that club's active, right? YouTube is amazing, not for admissions pieces though. It's just going to freak you out. But every single school has a YouTube channel and a lot of departments have their own YouTube channel. So you can see current events and what current students are doing and kind of get the vibe, right? Campus Reels has, they have student tours led by students at that school on their phones. And a lot of times they'll tell you a lot of things that admissions probably doesn't want you to know. Here's the laundry room. It's not my favorite. There's one washing machine for all of us on this floor, like things like that. So going just a little bit deeper, remember you're buying a product, right? It's not just about them saying yes to you, it's you saying yes to them. So don't be afraid to ask questions like you would if you were buying a car. Yeah, it's cute and it's in the color that I want it, but like, will it run? Is it safe? Look at consumer reports, right? Things like that. And again, don't be afraid to ask those questions because then your why WashU essay and your why Cornell essay is now infinitely more specific and better because you can be like, I talked to Professor Cindy. She, gave me a whole tour of the department. I'm really interested in this like concentration of classes that you have. And then I can work in the nanotech lab or something like that. Right. And you'll get that from those conversations. So it's going, you've done all of your research now. Now it's time to get even deeper. And don't be afraid to ask those questions because they're also selling their school. I would say the main differences, having visited both, Cornell's a lot more stressed out. WashU is a lot more laid back. WashU, there's a lot of double majors and like people just taking things for fun. You don't see that as much as Cornell. They're pretty siloed. Cornell does have an amazing connections because they are officially Ivy. So like I said, internships, you have all of those big consulting companies coming in and things like that. WashU, you're going to get a lot more attention. So one of the pictures in my second slide, it's raining and I'm at WashU with a little umbrella, WashU umbrella. Great school. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Alexia.
Hi. So my question just goes as far as majors because I've always thought I wanted to do a specific major and I like geared my 4 years of high school towards the classes and building a transcript that would fit nicely with that major. And I think I don't want to major in that anymore, but I'm not sure if I want to change my major once I'm in school, once I've been accepted into the school through that. So I wanted to major in environmental science, and now I'm thinking I want to major in environmental policy, so more the law side of it. And I don't know if it's a big issue to change your major while you're in school, or if it's a bigger issue to change to not be as ideal as an applicant.
So it is going to depend on the program. For both, they're not they're related. So it'd be different if you were going from engineering to theater, right? It's completely different, right? So if you're super worried about it, I would always say that you should apply for the major that you want, because it can be harder and there's like bureaucracy and paperwork to get your major changed. So you can't really game the system that way, like, oh, I'm going to apply to this one and then like move over. So I would say that I would apply for the environmental policy major. There's an additional information section in the Common App and usually in all other applications. Don't be afraid to write a paragraph in there that says, you know, I explored this and prepared for this my whole 4 years of college. And what I realized is I really want to go into the law side of this. And so that's my next adventure. Just give admissions context. That's all. They're not going to be like, oh, I can't believe you changed your mind. That's not allowed, right? They know that you guys are going to change your mind. And so don't be afraid to tell them that. And because environmental science and environmental policy are so well related, you actually will be better at environmental policy because you've done a lot of preparation on the science side, because you understand all the workings of that. So I would just put that in the additional information section and apply for the major that you want to apply for. If you decide later that you absolutely 100% are completely and utterly changing your major, it's just a lot of paperwork is all it is. But yeah, apply for the major that you want. All right. Shruti, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Probably not. I believe you're next.
Shruti, are you frozen? On my end, she looks a little frozen.
Oh, she might be frozen. Oh no. Okay, I'll come back. Tristan, I think you're next.
I had 2 questions. The first one is, I heard something about appealing the scholarships that schools can offer you and like asking for more money. Do you know any more about that?
Yes. Okay. So there's about a 50% chance that it will change anything. Those are pretty good odds, right? So once you get your financial aid award letter offers and you've kind of, reorganized them, for your top 3 choices, you can appeal. You can write an appeals letter to each financial aid office and ask for more money. There's 2 types of appeals. There's a need-based appeal and there's a merit appeal. The need-based appeal would be really specific as to why you perhaps could not afford that school. So maybe your parent, their income changed. Maybe what you reported is different. Maybe you guys look really good on paper, but that's not the reality. A need-based appeal letter, you have to be really specific in that letter about what has changed, what's different, and that this is your top choice. And you're really hoping that you can go to the school, but you just can't with their current award offer, you just can't afford it. Is there anything else out there? A merit appeal letter is different. And that's asking for more money because you would love to go to that school, but this other school's offering you a little bit more money. You have to be kind of careful with that because you don't want to be like, well, I would go to your school in a second, but this other school over here is offering me $10,000 more. So what can you do for me? It's more, here are my achievements. Here are my achievements since turning in my application. You are my top choice school, but at this point, I am being offered more money from other choices. A lot of times, unless that school is a direct competitor, it won't matter that you mention it. So you can just say, I'm getting offered, more substantial scholarship offers, and you can name them from other schools. However, this is my top choice. Are there other scholarships out there for me? Is there anything else that you can do for me? 50% of the time they'll say yes. 50% of the time they say no. There's a new software that some of the colleges have that calculate exactly how much money they need to offer you in order for you to say yes to them, which is kind of shady. I don't like that. But definitely for your top choices, write an appeal letter and see what they say. Can't hurt. And it needs to be from you. So you need to send it directly, not your parents. Shruti, you froze.
Yes, I did. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
My mouse wouldn't move. But anyways, my question was regarding the recommendation letter, specifically for the optional one from someone outside of school. So is it better to ask someone who will be able to attest to all of your activities, or choose a specific one like community service, for example?
I think that either is strong. It's going to depend on what most you want to communicate through your application. So if you have someone who knows you really well and has like seen you get into each activity and has like been there and can really speak to those specifics, and you really want to demonstrate like maybe a lot of your activities are concentrated in an area, that might be the person to ask. If for some reason, or if, for example, you're applying to schools where community service is one of the draws to why you're applying there, like they do service activities, that's really important to you, then the community service person might be better. So I think what you'll need to evaluate is what in your application do you want most to communicate about yourself, and how will each person do that? Because a lot of people will just hand you a paper version, it might not be a bad idea to ask both. And then you can kind of like assign different people. I don't know if you guys know this, you can assign different recommendations to each school. So like maybe for some schools, like Tulane is big on service work. Maybe for Tulane, your outside recommender is that community service person. But then maybe over here, maybe it's the person who can attest to all your activities. So I hate saying it depends, because that's the worst, but it depends. But both are good choices.
Okay, and I'm guessing it's the same for the main Common App essay, like whether you talk about a broad range of things or if you just focus on one. Does that matter?
Ethan does this really well with narrative versus montage. If you have like a really deep story or a deep aspect about yourself that you really want to focus on, then focusing on that one thing is a good idea. If you have a lot of different things that you want to communicate and you want to like weave them together with a theme, then montage essay format's probably better because you can cover a lot more ground. So I think it just kind of depends, like you said, exactly what you want to communicate about yourself. Is it one deep thing, like everything I've done has been in this one area? Or is it like, I like all these different things. I'm curious about this and this and this and this, right? So again, reference Ethan's materials on that because I think that'll help with the essay too.
Thank you.
All right. Madeline, I believe you're next.
Actually, Tristan was before me.
Okay, Tristan.
Yes, I had another question about studying abroad. I just know that Pepperdine is one of the more local university or colleges that has a great studying abroad program. Do you know anything about applying to universities outside of the country?
Yes. So it's going to differ from country to country. I'm most familiar with the UK system. So applying to University of Edinburgh, Dublin, University of London, Cambridge, Oxford, etc. Study abroad here in the States, you can study abroad pretty much at any school in the States. And if they don't have the program that you want, you can actually, schools will partner up with other schools to offer more broad range of study abroad options. So for example, study abroad wise, you could possibly study in Cambridge at one of the Cambridge schools and still stay at UCLA or Pepperdine, et cetera. That's an option. If you're thinking about going to a school outside of the country, the UK system specifically, it's slightly different. It's only 3 years there to get your bachelor's degree. You're only studying your major. So there's no gen ed. It actually can be cheaper to be in the UK system than here in the States, which is crazy, right? The application process is a lot different. They do want test scores. They want APs, 4s or 5s or better. 5s are better for, you know, the really competitive schools. And your application, your personal statement is solely on what has prepared you to study the major you're going to study, because that's all you're studying there. And so they don't care about your activities unless they relate to your major. And so the way that you do your personal statement is very different. The timelines are different. They use the UCAS. It's a common app for the UK schools. My best advice is, again, every single one of those schools has an international admissions counselor. University of St. Andrews in Scotland, Thomas is our US international admissions counselor. He's amazingly nice. They will also oftentimes step you step by step through the process. So they'll talk about the UCAS, your personal statement, and things like that. The Canadian system is also different than the US system, and I'm vaguely familiar with the Australian system. But the big difference between schools abroad is that you are only focusing on your major. That's it. There's no general ed. And there's not like sports and things like that. That's all outside of school. I mean, they'll have like, you know, clubs and things like that where you can do that, but it's not, you're not going to have football. You're not going to have, so it's a very different experience, but it is really cool. So I've had a couple students study abroad to go to school abroad. And then I've had a lot of students that study abroad for a semester a year. All right, I know it's 10:59. I haven't got you all to your questions. Let's see. Let me take one minute and I'll try to answer as fast as I can. I know I haven't talked to Nikki yet. Madeline, is that okay? Madeline, put your message, put your question in the chat and I'll try to answer it real fast. Well, I'll try to do both at once. Nikki, what's your question?
Going back to what Tristan was saying, I'm also interested in studying abroad, but I'm more interested in going over in a broad group that goes like in a group rather than an exchange. Do you know any colleges that go over as a group besides like Pepperdine and ACU?
Most colleges, they will offer that opportunity. So Wake Forest is one off of the top of my head. They have a global exchange program with a group of 20 students freshman year, and you go to Copenhagen, which is really cool. I had a student who did that her whole first year. So I think that what you would want to do is look at the study abroad office at the schools that you're looking for or looking at, and contact the study abroad office and ask them that. It's not very common that you would be 100% on your own. A lot of times you'll have a group of other students from the same school or just a group of American college students together. Madeline, if you wanted, you're welcome. Madeline, just real fast, if you wanted to minor in something. So if you are interested in minoring, you don't have to declare that when you submit your application, but if the school asks, say, why this school essay, weaving that in might not be a bad idea. And what also appeals to me is that you have this amazing program and I want to minor in that because it adds over here. So if you feel like it's really important and it gives more, dynamics to your application, add that in. If the school offers an interview, you can add that into your interview. Or if you think it's really important, you can add that again in that additional information section. So it just kind of depends on how, if it's integral to like that they really need to know that. I would say that you should definitely put that in the why this school essay. Ladies, thank you so much for allowing me to share some of my passion with you. Like I said, this is my jam. This is what I do every day. Again, I cannot emphasize enough, ask amazing questions, reach out to admissions, reach out to the school. They will do everything that they can to help you. Best of luck, even though you don't need it. I'm always impressed by this entire group. You're going to move mountains, as Dr. Seuss says. So best of luck. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can always contact me. Just tell me like, hey, I was in DYW, just have this quick question. You can email me. My email, I'll put it in the chat for you. Oops, I forgot the .and .com, but get the idea. And then For those free resources like the Common Data Set, you can just go to our website and go to our blog and you can just download all of that.
Thank you so much. That was so informative. I know they'll probably all rewatch this. I feel like I'd learn so many nuggets every year that I'm like, why did I not know you when I was in college? So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Tell your staff we're sorry, but thank you so much for staying on.
They're fine. They're like, oh, I'll just work on other stuff. Bye, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.